Dr. Barry Borden, past president of Holy Blossom Temple. It's Tuesday, January the 12th, 2016, and this interview is part of the oral history project of the archives of Holy Blossom Temple. So my first question to Barry is, you grew up at Holy Blossom, you've been there all your life. What are your very first memories of Temple?
That's a very good question. First memories of Temple. Actually, the first memories I would say of Temple is the building itself. Knowing that as a little guy in those days, maybe 4, 5, 6 years old, the only way I would attend Holy Blossom was to go into the building with my parents and or brother and sister. But I would say the grandness of the edifice was the sanctuary
yes.
Was what I remember the best.
Mm-hmm. And you were consecrated there. Do you have any memories of that?
I have a terrific memory of having my picture taken on the marble steps, the class picture at consecration. And I definitely remember with great fondness being presented the small little Torah that all the students were presented when they were consecrated, and carrying it over my shoulder.
Do you still have it?
I do not.
Okay. As you got into the religious school and grades 1 and 2 and so on, what memories do you have of religious school?
Some of the memories weren't so positive because very often I didn't want to be at religious school. You would want to be out playing with your friends, you would want to be out skating, you would want to be anywhere but in another school setting, because often, it was after school you would go to Temple for religious education. Sundays you would go for Sunday school. And so there were some negative feelings, but the other things that I remember quite vividly are the teachers and the sternness and often the level of control that the teachers would exert on the students, and the respect that was developed between teacher and students. Because, if you stepped out of line, in those days, your parents would know about it.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember them being informed about what they were teaching you? Do you remember that you said you had some respect for them? Was part of that because they were good teachers and had the knowledge of their subject and were able to impart it?
Yes, very much so. The curriculum, the gearing of the curriculum to the students, especially in the lower grades as we worked up with religious school, was very pointed. It was a part of an education you didn't get anywhere else. So it was very valuable, and as I can always remember being taught certain things about the holidays, about prayers, and then going and practicing that at home and being recognized by your family as, oh, he's growing up, he knows that prayer, he knows the Shema, he knows the basic prayers that we do at different holidays. So I think very early on I recognized the importance of it, but still didn't want to accept it all, in total.
Now, did you bring anything from religious school to the home that hadn't been there in the past?
No. Personally, no. My parents provided a Jewish home. We celebrated Shabbat. My parents were members of Temple from the time that I was born in 1946. And it was that type of religious practice that I was learning at religious school, but was already in my home.
Your parents came from a traditional background, or?
They did. My father originally, when he moved up to Strathern from downtown, belonged to Beth Shalom. And his father, who was living at that time, who came across from Russia, they had a conservative Orthodox background, but I didn't know much about that because my first year, especially when I was born, we already had moved to Holy Blossom.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember any of your teachers in particular?
I remember Miss Grant for sure.
Esther Grant.
Esther Grant.
Was she one of your teachers actually, or she was one of the department head only?
No, I can remember her teaching also. Mm-hmm. When it came to Hebrew school as opposed to religious school, Ethel Rakes stands out very strongly as being certainly someone you remember because of her talents and because of her the force with which she taught. As we went on in religious school, there was more contact, say after grade 6, 7, 8, with teachers even like Gordy Wolf, Ben Schlesinger, people like that. I often said now as an adult, some of the religious education that was imparted to us should have been reserved for us as adults as opposed to children, because I don't think we appreciated the quality and the quantity and the what was being presented to us in such a strong and good fashion.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit about your memories of Ethel Rakes and Esther Grant, more specifically, perhaps.
Well, it was also the days of Heinz Warschauer.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to come to him
next.
next.
What I do remember is, as a young boy and having friends who were my age at Holy Blossom, we weren't the easiest group of kids to control. And there was probably a lot of more discipline being net out to us than, and a lot of time taken away from the ability to educate. So what I do remember is very strict rules. I do remember respect, but it often came out in those ages as a fear mm-hmm. of your teachers, a fear of Heinz Warschauer, a fear of Miss Grant, and for sure Ethel Rakes, because rules and standards were set. And in those days, it was the teachers knew the parents, either through siblings that had gone through the religious school or even individually, but the parents knew personally the teachers, and it was nothing for a teacher to say to one of the parents, your son steps out of line too much and he better be better the next time. So I remember the education, but I also remember the disciplinary approach.
Now that must have changed at some point, such that this kind of fear of some of these people became more that you really wanted to learn from them.
Absolutely. And that's why I use the word fear, but it became respect, mm-hmm. you know, an ability.
Tell us a little about your memories of Heinz.
Heinz, our family were active. Both, or my sister, my brother, and myself, me being the youngest, went right through religious school and right up to confirmation. We were all confirmed. So Heinz became to us almost part of our family. Not in a personal way, not in a social way, but he was very intricate when we were in Holy Blossom to be that figure of authority, figure of leadership that our parents tended to look on with favor, because he had the ability to again teach but expect in return. And if he didn't get that, what he was looking for in return, it was nothing for him to either with his voice tell you what he was thinking And it didn't take much for Heinz to raise his voice. It wasn't a scream, it was just an intonation, but you knew you were not doing the right thing. And again, you grew to respect this man, because even as a young person, you knew of his knowledge and you knew his strengths. As I grew older, I always felt that I was growing closer to Heinz Warschauer. He was there. He was always looking out for you, always looking out for the students. But in the same time, as I said, he expected something in return. And that is that you demonstrated what you were learning in a positive fashion.
Do you have any anecdotes that may come later in life, even after you were long since finished with religious school, maybe your own kids were in religious school, about Heinz?
By the time my children went to religious school, Heinz was already gone. But as an example of what can be in a positive fashion, that's what I learned from Heinz, the potential. But if you didn't express yourself in a positive way of wanting to gain that potential, it was a losing situation. And Heinz knew, if you were one of those that just wanted to be there, or you wanted to be there and learn.
And he approached you differently?
Me personally?
No, those.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Was he a presence at your dinner table, even without being there?
At times.
Was he a sort of topic of family discussion?
At times,
over the
very much so. And I can remember my sister, who became a student teacher, intricately talking about Heinz Warschauer and the style and the ability and the respect. So, yeah, Holy Blossom was very much in part at our table. And the people like Heinz Warschauer were Holy Blossom.
Do you have memories of maybe your first being at the High Holy Day Children's Services?
Excuse me. I do remember attending High Holy Day Children's Services. From my memory, were not as active as they are now, or as active as when my children went through Holy Blossom. Participation. But the amount of time that I would spend at Holy Blossom would be focused around the high holiday time. And the religious school aspect, but during high holidays, that's when you went to Holy Blossom. And you went to the children's service.
Which was in the sanctuary.
Yes. Yes.
You remember being impressed by, you mentioned before, by the sanctuary. These were services in that sanctuary for you.
And that was the touch base for enjoying temple and being part of temple. And looking at temple with awe. I mean, we, as you said, whenever I would walk into the sanctuary, for whatever reason, with the religious school or otherwise, it was always with awe.
Do you remember Rabbi Feinberg?
Absolutely, yes.
What do you remember about him?
I can remember Rabbi Feinberg, and his preaching I can remember, his forthrightness. But what I remember between Rabbi Feinberg and Rabbi Eisen at those times was the final benediction. Rabbi Feinberg standing with his gown, they were gowned in those days, with his hands up over the congregation from the bema and giving the final benediction. To me, he was a power. And that I can remember.
And Rabbi Eisen?
Rabbi Eisen also. It was Rabbi Eisen, who I've always found soft-spoken, gentle, but it was a team. They were the rabbis. They were the rabbis, and a rabbi very close to the super being of our days.
Now you were bar mitzvahed at Holy Blossom
Yes.
by Rabbi Feinberg
Rabbi Feinberg and Rabbi Eisen.
and Rabbi Eisen. What do you remember about your bar mitzvah? Was that a big event in your life?
Oh, very big, very big. It was the days that you always had, or almost always, it was a double bar mitzvah. And you were being bar mitzvahed with one of your friends you had been going to religious school with. People didn't come just to have a bar mitzvah. They were participating in the religious school and Hebrew school. And the one thing I can remember, aside from the party and having the great time, was the person I was bar mitzvah with fainted when he went to read the Torah. And there was a whole hullabaloo on the bima, and everything ended up fine. But when you ask for a memory, that's what I remember.
And then you went on to confirmation.
Yes.
And did you go on after you were confirmed? What was your connection to the temple?
Next to nothing.
This is through your high school and university years.
Right. After confirmation, I became basically inactive and still went to high holidays. But that was the general attendance at Holy Blossom for me and for probably the majority of my classmates. That those who stopped after bar mitzvah was one group, but in those days we still had a large group that went on to confirmation. But after confirmation, wasn't much participation.
When did you reconnect?
I ultimately went away to school, to university, to Queen's University. We always were a member. And we attached the temple in a very serious way when Susan and I decided to get married. There was never a doubt that Holy Blossom was my synagogue. Never, even when I wasn't there, Holy Blossom afforded our family and me a part of my home. It was always that feeling. The rabbis, the cantors, the people that made life, another part of life, very important. When we ultimately got married, Susan was from Adith Israel, her family, my family from Holy Blossom, and Susan and I had decided that Holy Blossom was going to be the place that we were going to join. But there was a little conflict in the marriage of where and affiliation. And to make a long story short, we ended up getting married at Beth Tzedek as the venue. Rabbi Plaut, Rabbi Rosenberg, and Rabbi Shield from Adith Israel officiated. So that kept everybody happy. But then we went away to school. When we came back, we reattached to Holy Blossom. Now, that was the semi-reattachment. My real reattachment to Holy Blossom as a religious institution came when my brother passed away. He was 45 years old and died in 1986. And at that time I returned to temple to say Kaddish. And from the first day of coming in...
You're now how old?
How old was I? Mm-hmm. I was 40. Mm-hmm. My brother was 45. I returned to temple to say Kaddish, and the welcoming nature and the feeling of reconnecting again with the place, the rabbis, but it was a feeling that I had never really felt individually or personally before. And the rest we can talk about later, but that was my real reconnection to observing Shabbat at shul and participation.
Let's talk for a minute about your children. Did they have the same experiences as you did growing up at Holy Blossom?
They did. It was very important to Susan and I that our children attend, we have 2 daughters, attend religious school and Hebrew school, and that they have the opportunity to have bat mitzvah and go on to be confirmed, which they did.
And how did they react to all of this? Well,
Probably in a very similar way that I did. They knew they had to go. They were imparted the educational standards that were given to them. They learned. We had a Jewish home all the time. We, celebrated Shabbat all the time with our family. So it was a very similar ongoing pattern. The difference was my mother-in-law and father-in-law were conservative, and the amount of experience that when we spent time with them in their home was different than the amount of experience from what we did or from what my parents did in their home. So it was an interesting melding of minds, and our children benefited by that.
mm-hmm. Are they connected now?
Yes. Karen is still a participating member, even though a little removed right now from Holy Blossom, and Lisa and her family are at Beth David.
Okay. You eventually became president of Holy Blossom. How did you get there?
Well, that's where the story in 1986 began. When my brother died, I started attending Holy Blossom every week. Very early on, I recognized people I had gone to school with, recognized people who I knew from Temple, and they were very welcoming. The temple itself was very welcoming. And I remember saying to myself at the beginning of that experience not to get involved in politics. I had learned a little bit from medical politics not to get involved with politics, but I did at the University of Toronto, and with setting up standards for education and emergency medicine. So I tried to promise myself I wouldn't get involved with religious politics. The issue is, once you get involved with the spiritual aspect of synagogue, I found it very difficult to stay away from politics, because I wanted for me the feelings that were important, but I also wanted to make sure for the next generations, and recognize that very quickly, that the next generations have what we had and what we shared with. So again, making a long story short, my brother was going to be a member of the board. He was president of B'nai B'rith Canada when he died, and he was going to be a member of the Holy Blossom board, and the board, after his death, asked me to participate. And then I became very active in the Department of Worship, and went from being on the worship committee to chairing the worship department. And from there, an expansion just naturally occurred, and then I was asked by the congregation to be president.
Were there any mentors along the way that you can name? Who in particular stands out, and in what way were they mentors to you?
Well, first of all, the relationships that I developed with our rabbinic staff and with our cantorial staff.
So we're talking about who at this point?
At the first, it was Rabbi Dov Marmer, mostly, Benny. And though in the associate rabbis and junior rabbis who were coming through at that time, Rabbi Silver, You know, Franklin, there's another story that goes along with the involvement. But the rabbis of the time, because you're involved in a political fashion, it afforded you a path to always become involved and learn from the professional staff of that time. I also was very fortunate in that early on in my medical career, because of Rabbi Plaut, I became a Reform Moil.
This is before you became president.
Oh, much long before
okay.
I became president. This wasn't just to do with Holy Blossom. This was to do with the City of Toronto. This was to do with the province of Ontario. At that time, Ellie Cass was the only non-Orthodox Moil. And one day I used to deliver babies, and I delivered a baby boy to Jewish parents. And the father of the son, I said, I guess you're going to have a bris. And he says, yes. I would like you to do it for us. Well, I wasn't a Moil, but he had his trust in me, so it prompted me to go and speak to Rabbi Plaut. I've got this one-day-old baby boy, Jewish boy. The parents want to have a bris. What can I do for them other than refer them to another Moil? Well, Rabbi Plaut said, no, you'll do it with me. And that was the start of a very, very pleasant and pleasing and overly positive relationship with the Jewish community in Toronto. It wasn't easy to come by. Rabbi Plaut taught me. Rabbi Franklin taught me. Rabbi Stroh taught me the rules and regulations. I was ultimately ordained by the Central Conference of American Rabbis at that time, but was not accepted in Toronto because I wasn't Orthodox. And then if you want to say, when did Temple become even more important as a standard, that in my life was a very pivotal point. Because when you're refused as a Jew, and I was refused at the hospitals because I was not an Orthodox Jew to perform Brit Milah, it becomes a personal fight, a personal feeling. And Rabbi Plaut insisted that we carry this through. And again, to make a long story short, it came down to the fact that Rabbi Plaut had such a relationship with all the rabbis in Toronto that I was ultimately accepted to be a Moil and do Brit Milah. But again, became very intricately in center focus of Holy Blossom, reaching out into the Reform community.
And you went on to yourself become a mentor to a number
Yes.
of Moilim.
Yes, we trained about 15 years later. We trained 5 new Reform Moilim, and there's been another course subsequently with 5 more Reform Moilim.
I believe some of them, or at least one of them, is a woman.
Yes, 2 of them are women. 2.
Which is another path-breaking
Yes,
effort.
in those days, in those days it was, because again, to allow a woman to perform Brit Milah at, let's say, Bet Tzedek was still not allowed until this was Rochelle Schwartz, who is a female Moilet. She broke that barrier, and the rabbis ultimately and the board accepted.
I can see this part of your life as a Moil. It brought you a great deal of satisfaction.
Extreme. It was an opportunity to give back to the community in an educational way. It was an opportunity to be close to Torah, because what you're doing is practicing what the Torah is teaching you and passing it to generation. And the closest I could come, I actually performed Brit Milah on my grandsons.
Mm.
And so, yes, it was an extremely rewarding profession.
Mm-hmm.
I want to come back to your work on the board, and I asked if you had any mentors on the board among the lay people, other past presidents and so on. Jack Geller, for example, was Jack.
Jack was a phenomenal leader, phenomenal communicator, and it was probably that whole group of past presidents and people involved at Temple who gave me the most. Again, when I was a young person, now that I'm thinking about it, you asked me what did I recognize about Temple as being so terrific, so strong. I can remember at the high holidays when I was a younger person, the ushers dressed in their black suits, Sid Banks, Carl Bald, people who would go up and take the Torah out of the ark. And I often say to myself, or often wonder, and I can remember that, I wonder if I'll ever be able to do something like that. And it did become a possibility. It did become a reality.
Mm-hmm.
So Jack Geller was one of those people. Gordy Wolf, Nancy Ruth, Henrietta Chesney, all the past presidents, and then the ones that I worked with, like Morris Cooper and Alan Garfinkel, and all those people who gave of themselves to make Temple a better and ongoing place for our community and expand, and as it expanded. Everybody was a mentor. And leadership at Temple works that way. You learn from one another and gain from one another.
Any of them that stand out in your mind, particularly as mentoring you personally? And taking an interest in you?
Yeah, I would say Nancy Ruth and Gordy Wolf.
Okay, you want to talk about that a bit?
Sure. Gordy was the type of person, if you ever had doubt about yourself, if you ever had doubt about what was going on, was the type of person who could synthesize the reasons for it. He could teach you, he could listen. He was a phenomenal listener. And guide you along the lines of, this is what you have to know, this is where you have to find the answer in order to move on. Nancy Ruth, also. Nancy was probably one of the most pivotal people in me becoming president, because when I was offered or asked to assume the presidency or vice presidency to become the president, she was the person who called me. And there was a lot of doubt in my mind whether either I could do the job or would I have the time to. I had a very busy practice.
Mm-hmm.
I was running all over the place. And with some reluctance, I accepted the position. But she took me under her wing and made sure that it was attainable. They made sure that my position didn't take over my life. And if there, one message
Was that her advice to you?
That was I was going to say one message I got from multiple past presidents is you have to control. And it wasn't just the past presidents. And when you say things come into your mind. Margaret Davidson. again, what a force. When I first was dealing with becoming a mohel, she was the one, not with Rabbi Plout, but she was the one that said, Barry, you are in charge. Don't let people take advantage of you. Don't let people overrule you. That was her attitude. But I can remember her telling me that and then speaking to her years later, and she still remembered that meeting that we had. But yeah, Nancy, Ruth, these people, because you can take life too seriously and it can become detrimental, but they tended to keep the perspective where it should be.
What were the critical issues that that came up during your tenure as president?
Critical issues, always budget.
Mm-hmm.
Temple renewal was starting then, 1998.
Meaning what precisely?
Started talking about changing physical plant,
Okay.
changing, John Moskowitz and his transition, becoming rabbi and moving on and talking about renewal, education, Leo Beck, the community. Still, there tended to be sort of a laxity towards the greater community as opposed to Holy Blossom itself, with the image that was being imparted that Holy Blossom was cold and unfeeling. So those were the types of things that we were dealing with at that time.
How did you resolve them?
Most of them weren't resolvable. Most of them were handled by setting a direction, setting a path. And on subsequent boards, you try and get people in who can walk that path, who can add to that path and get conclusion. We have a building right now that's being constructed, hopefully with renewal. Hopefully it's going to all be for the better. That started in 1998 discussions about that. But we're here today, so it has moved along. What we're doing within our congregation, membership, all topics of the day and all things that have to move on.
So a lot of the things that are going on now, you can trace back to your own president. Were there any crises that you had to deal with?
There were some not to be discussed, as with any board or with any establishment. There's always going to be some crises. There were budgetary problems, financial problems that we worked through. Again, the educational standard. When we first, Leo Beck became part, then didn't become. This is all a continuation. You don't have to label everything as a crisis, but you label everything as necessity to move on, necessity to listen and learn.
Now, there must have been, you had to take some decisions, obviously, as president. The buck stops with you. What decision that you took during your time as president are you most proud of?
Well, the first one was between Morris Cooper and myself, having Jack Geller appointed as honorary past president for life. I think that was extremely important to the feeling of Temple, the leadership of Temple. So that I was, and I know Morris was the same way, very proud of that issue. The establishment of a path or a direction for Temple renewal, to look at temple in light of the community. To get that started, I think, was very important and very pivotal in temple's history. Every day at temple, we're still viable, we are still there, we still have the feeling of what the community is. We participate in areas outside of temple, the decreasing and changing demographics, things along that line also, which if you don't handle them, if you just take a back seat and will let things evolve, some things may not evolve in the way you hope they would. So you have to be there, you have to be strong, you have to pick your right people to do what has to be done.
Have there been things that evolved in ways that you didn't want?
Yes. Didn't want maybe the way things happen. But like any democratic political society, you can't agree with everything all the time. But you hope the end run comes out the best for the majority.
Well, Holy Blossom today is very different in most respects from the Holy Blossom that you and I grew up with in the 1950s
Absolutely.
and 60s. It's just a different being. Are there some ways in which you think it's been an improvement? That the
Yes.
things are better now and you're happy that they've developed and you want to enlarge them?
Yeah, I think the traditional approach that has evolved at Temple has been very strong, and I think
Which traditions?
well, prayer. Let's talk about prayer,
Okay.
for instance. As a younger person, I remember the Union Prayer Book. Comparing that to what we use now is head over heels. I believe more Hebrew, dress, talit, kippot, the music, all more spiritual, I think, than we had as we were growing up. And I think that's all for the better. The day my father put on a kippah and a tallis because he sat with me was a high point in my religious life. Because it was always what my father did was what I was supposed to do. And in this case, what I was doing, my father was adding a level of respect to, which was significant. And I think in a lot of families and in the congregation itself, no one says you have to do these things. But the fact that you have the ability to do them if you want is very rewarding.
Are there developments and changes that have come about that you think are not for the best at Holy Blossom? In some ways, do you think it was better when we were there?
No,
Okay.
no. I think from what I know of the educational process and the level of education being provided and the reaching out into the community with that education, all is very positive. I think we were a little too, now maybe it was a sign of the time, but we were isolating. We were, Holy Blossom was a focal point for us, not for the community. And I think what we have now, what's being developed now and has been developed for years now, the welcoming and warm nature, inviting people in, but yet still maintaining You don't do anything to gain that. You maintain what you know is right within your own home and within your own walls, but yet it can still be approached differently. Rabbi Moskowitz used a term which I use quite often, and I'm sure it came from other rabbis too, but temple is a building with many doors. And you may come in through one door, but certainly get touched and involved in multiple other venues. But it doesn't mean you have to participate in them all. You don't have to accept them all, as long as you're in a place that's belonging to you.
Mm-hmm. And you were certainly involved. Tell us about your involvement now, before we go. Since you no longer being president, how have you connected to Holy Blossom? What's been your involvement?
Well, immediate past president. Beyond that, I have stayed in touch with my own needs significantly at Temple, because for me it is a part of my home, part of my being, and has developed that way over the years. Politically, I have drawn back significantly. I think the young leadership and the new leadership need their space, need their room to do what they have to do the best that they can do. One fear that I do have, the Constitution has been changed this year.
Mm-hmm.
Past presidents no longer sit on the board directly. And when you ask, do I think there's potential of one problem? I think our history. The past presidents presented a level of history in an ongoing fashion, which I fear may be lost by not having them involved. Even though they're being involved in a certain other fashion, it's not the same as it was. So for those reasons, though, in a political body, I've become less involved. I still reach out to our community. I still reach out to membership. I still reach out to worship and participate in committee level when asked. But in other concrete ways, aside from being an usher, a gaba, and a few other.
And you still come Saturday mornings to Torah study class.
Yes.
with the rabbi at
Mm-hmm.
9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing that for many years now?
Since my brother died.
How have you found that enriching, and how have you found the teaching?
Terrific. It's a different level of education. While I was practicing medicine, I'm retired now, but while I was practicing medicine, to be able to go to Torah study and services and observe Shabbat in the way that I did, with my family, by myself at synagogue most of the time, it was my other place, my meaningful, part of my meaningful home, where I could feel Judaism, feel prayer, feel education in a different fashion than I did in the real, as we call it, my professional world. And as far as the teaching, I've been fortunate in all those years. We've had different teachers. I started, it was Rabbi Marmer, Rabbi Moskowitz, some of the other rabbis at the time, and now, it's an ongoing, changing level of deliverance of education. Rabbi Splansky now has her mode. Rabbi Marmer had his mode. And it's all phenomenally valuable for me.
Can you think of anything that you've particularly learned during those? Any one or two things that you've particularly learned during these classes that was new to you and revelatory in some way?
Everything is new to me at Torah study. The stories may not be, but the analysis of the stories, the discussion of the stories, Torah. I cannot read Torah, even though I keep threatening myself that I would like to learn.
You mean chant Torah?
Chant Torah. I mean, even when we learn to read Torah,
right.
read Hebrew. But there's no one Saturday, one Torah study that stands out. They're all of equal. I look forward to coming to Torah study. Do I enjoy every one of them? Some are more mundane than others, but I always walk out of there feeling rewarded, feeling.
Well, let me ask you how Holy Blossom has influenced you in your own Jewish practice.
Very much so. Both, I have to look at that individually, first of all. From the time I started going back to temple, I can't even measure the importance of it to me to such a degree that when I am not able to attend, it's very bothersome. However, I'm able to still practice a level of Judaism, practice my own level of prayer, even if I'm not in Holy Blossom, but that's come with me from Holy Blossom in the Jewish community. It's been very influential to my family and how we practice Judaism in our home. But I have to say also that my extended family, my Susan's parents and extended family of those days, was equally important in teaching me levels of Judaism and practice of Judaism. Something that I know at this point in my life, and for many years, that wouldn't have been enough to be a member of Holy Blossom like I was as a teenager or in the early adult phase of my life, when I wasn't really attending or participating.
How about with connection to Israel?
There is a strong connection to Israel. Strong in travel, no. But strong feelings as Israel.
Talking about yourself.
Talking about myself. As a strong feeling of Israel as my homeland, our homeland, yes. And that comes from my participation. But our family also feel that way. And that's, I think, from grandparents to parents to children. And hopefully to continue in being passed on.
And to the greater Jewish community. Now, some of that you mentioned came from your work as a moil.
Absolutely.
Connected with the Jewish community at large in a way that you hadn't until that time. Some of that come from Holy Blossom, which is itself more connected to the Jewish community at large than it was when you and I were growing up there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have to say it did, because Rabbi Plaut was the integral part of the whole equation with me becoming a moil. And my home was Holy Blossom. So yes, it was important, it is important. Carrying the word forward was a responsibility, not just something that I liked doing, but it had to be done. And it was a responsibility, and I took it very seriously.
Rabbi Platt was clearly a big influence on you.
Very much so.
In your becoming a Moyle. Any other way in which you can recall?
Well, Susan and I were just talking about it last night.
Okay.
As a human being, my parents loved Rabbi Feinberg. Well, my mother and father loved Rabbi Plaut. Susan and I became involved with Rabbi Plaut more just as we were getting married. And we can remember sitting in his study at that time and saying to us, Barry and Susan, you know, there's more to squeezing the tube of toothpaste. Some squeeze it from the top, some squeeze it from the bottom. Are you going to be able to get along with this? Now, it sounds trite, but it was the opening of a dialogue that he made us feel totally comfortable. And that comfort, and Susan went on to doing work with UJA and with Federation, and Rabbi Plaut was her, was a mentor to her, and our relationship just continued from that point on. So yeah, he very much so.
And Rabbi Marmer?
In a personal way, Rabbi Marmer and I became very close because of my political realm. Terrific rabbi, phenomenal person. Can't say enough good about him. But that's how our relationship grew. And then his tenure came to an end, and I became involved with John Moskowitz.
Did you get along with him?
Very much so.
And you mentioned Rabbi Franklin. You were going to say something about him.
Well, it was that year that I became a Moyle that Rabbi Plaut charged Rabbi Franklin and Rabbi Stroh to make sure I was trained properly. Because one thing to Rabbi Plaut, and I can remember him saying this also, says, we'll teach you how to be a Moyle, but you've got to do it the right way. Because he believed you don't do it the Reform way, you do it the right way. And you may be a Reform Jew, and some of the things you're doing as a Moyle may be adaptation, but you're still doing the right thing.
Were there other Moyles who helped you along as well? Or
Eli Cass. The others were totally blocking.
So he would have given you the medical
Yes.
help that you needed, and so and was welcoming of having someone else come in.
Oh,
to help
absolutely.
him out.
Absolutely, because unfortunately his health started failing 4 or 5 years after I had begun being a Moyle, but he passed the torch on in a very gracious way, and it all worked.
Well, we've talked about Holy Blossom and its influence on you with respect to Jewish practice, to Israel, Jewish community. How about God? Your faith in God, has that been?
Always believed in God. Never questioned my belief in God. So, no, my closeness, my prayers to God, my ability, my obligation, my feelings, certainly all of those things are much stronger, but my belief in God hasn't changed. You know, I've just been able to be closer to what I'm feeling.
What do you think the challenges are for Holy Blossom in the next few years or even beyond?
I think the challenge is, one, to finish the building and be able to set up their programming that's necessary. I think Holy Blossom is going to definitely have to establish itself in the community more firmly from a population point of view, because Holy Blossom, I don't believe, well, they don't support themselves anymore by just the surrounding community, like when you and I went to school, that most of the people lived in Forest Hill. The city of Toronto is widespread. It's all over the place. I think schools are going to have, or they're already having problem maintaining their membership. And there's got to be ways and means to bring people back to the synagogue. The way our children feel about membership in synagogue is not, again, the same that we felt. There was no question I was going to join a synagogue when when we got married or when I came back from school. There was no question. You join a synagogue, that's what you do. There's some of that's going to have to come back, because otherwise I think one of the challenges we have as Reformed Jews, and I think Jews everywhere, is a declining enrollment. And I believe with declining enrollment, you're also going to have declining involvement. And if you have declining involvement,
So how would you suggest that we can bring people back?
It's a good question.
Do we have to bring them back to something different than
Maybe
synagogues have been traditionally across the board? Like the full service synagogue that we grew up in may no longer appeal to a younger generation. The synagogue that provides social hall, that provides life cycle events, that provides religious education, that provides adult education, that provides daily services, and so that this may be a model that is undergoing some rethinking among young people.
I agree with you, but part of that, you still have to have the ability to direct people where to find what they were looking for. So I think the synagogue still has to be the model of the center. And as I said about being many doors to come in, I think I don't see the Holy Blossom becoming a small shul or synagogue that people come to just for prayer. Maybe like one of the downtown shuls or some of those. I think Holy Blossom is in a position of leadership and has the ability and the voice, if used properly, to attract. And I believe some of the changes that we're feeling right now with the younger people, with the kids coming to service, with different attitudes, this is what's going to bring, I think, people in and people back.
This being
more relaxed approach, but people doing what they have to do.
Rabbi Splansky says that we have to get bigger and we have to get smaller. Would you second that?
Yes.
I mean, it would seem a paradox.
Yeah.
But
it's true.
You know what she means.
Yes,
you have
absolutely.
to have the feeling of intimacy and smallness,
which
people crave, and yet grow the institution in numbers and budgets.
Well, again, business is business. Religion and spirituality is religion and spirituality. But somehow you can't have one without, well, you can have one, but you can't have four walls around it without a business.
If this oral history is going to be watched by people 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 25, 50 years from now, is there any advice you would give to future generations from your perspective now that you would want to relay to them?
What I could say is that Holy Blossom Temple as an institution has offered me the ability to go in certain directions that had I not been involved with Temple, I never would have achieved. By being allowed to do the things that I did as a Jew through both the community as well as Holy Blossom has enriched me and my life, and I think in part has helped me with my entire life, including my profession. So what I wish that everybody have the opportunity to do is at least embark on being involved. Embark on being true to yourself, your faith, your spirituality, and utilize your abilities to gain throughout your lives. When I was consecrated at 6 years old, 7 years old, I never would have thought I'd be president of Holy Blossom Temple. But I was given that opportunity, and I was able to represent myself and do of benefit to others. And hopefully that is something you all will feel the benefit for, and that your lives will be enriched also.